Well, thank you all for coming for this month's Lunch and Learn. Today we're happy to have Ted Keim and Kat McDevitt from Dodge Communications. And Dodge specializes, it's one of the larger communications firms in Atlanta. And Kat and Ted have expertise specifically in the healthcare field and life sciences. And Kat is the Vice President for Strategic Development, or Strategy, sorry.
Everything and nothing, yeah.
Everything and nothing. And Ted is the Vice President for Business Development with Dodge. Their firm can help us or help companies with their strategic initiatives, both online and through print advertisements and so forth. And today they're going to tell us a little bit about the advantages and strategies that we can use to share our press releases for particularly small companies like are here. So please join me in welcoming Kat and Ted.
Well, thank you very much. Before I turn it over to Kat, I just wanted to introduce myself. And Kat's the smart one. She's going to do most of the talking. I'm just the pretty face, but which is kind of scary, I know. But no, we're with Dodge Communications, and we're really excited to be here. I actually met Derek out in San Francisco, had to travel across the country to meet you, and we live, 70 miles away. We just got talking and thought this would be a great idea to interface with you all. So thank you for having us. So my background is I used to run physician practices and kind of got geeked out on EHRs and went to the dark side of sales, worked for a small $140 billion company called McKesson, and worked with hospitals around the country setting up their health information exchange strategies and also their physician EHR strategies. So had fun with that. Really excited to be here at Dodge, and really what we try to do is three things for healthcare companies. One is to really create brand awareness. There's a lot of different things we do around that, but we obviously know companies need to have a strong brand, and we have some great strategies to help with that. Secondly, we try to position our customers as thought leaders in their healthcare industry segment, and again, number of strategies and tactics that we employ to do that. Lastly, we want to create demand for our customers' products and services. So those are really the three areas of focus that we have at Dodge. Again, a lot of things that we do to make that happen. So what we're going to talk about today is press releases, and Kat's going to take you through all that. So I'll give it to you, Kat. You can introduce yourself and take it away.
Well, like I said, it's everything and nothing. I'm VP Strategic Services. That means, everything and nothing, right? But I work a lot with life sciences companies like y'all, and startups to big publicly traded companies, and some that started at startup and made it that way. So the goal of this presentation is so that you guys can walk out of here and actually be able to do something on your own. So I'm not going to tell you have to spend $2,000 on a business wire release and that's all you have to do. I'm going to tell you to do it on your own, because I know a lot of you don't have the resources to do it, right? So it's hopefully going to be pretty short, 30 minutes, and then if you guys have situations in your own companies or your own ideas where you'd be interested in doing a release, happy to talk about it. And stop me anyway along the way too. I have two examples from companies, sort of like y'all. I know most of you are in life sciences, maybe a little bit of tech involved in there, but these should be applicable. And I'm also going to go through some publications that are also relevant and how to approach those. So I just went through my agenda, sorry, but that's basically it, right? So we're just going to talk about why should you do it, how do you do it, and then once you have it, what do you do with it? Do you just put it on the wire? Who do you talk to? And what should you expect after that? So real quick, I know that some of you may have talked to some people, or there might be professors here or other agencies that might say press releases are dead. So in a lot of cases they are, because it was an old format that a lot of people used to present nothing. But if you have real news, and by that I mean these things on the side here, big product launches, if you're establishing your company, we heard that one of y'all just put out a grant release this morning, funding, any strategic hires once you get a little bigger, that stuff is all worth a press release. And it doesn't have to be very expensive. And the reason you do it is because for reporters, which is your primary audience for this stuff, in some cases it's also investors if you're looking for funding, it's still the format that they're the most used to seeing the news. And if they're going to write an article about you, they actually will copy and paste out of a press release and throw it in their articles. So you might get something original out of an interview from this kind of thing, but mostly they're just going to be copying and pasting it. So it's in your benefit to talk in the most simple language and to make sure that that message is exactly what you want, because in most cases they'll just copy and paste it. And I will be showing you, we'll go in depth into a release. It's for a seed round, a $2 million seed round for a blood diagnostic company. So that should be a good real example too of how it actually happened. And then, like I mentioned, who cares about press releases? Everyone that matters cares about a press release. In my world, at least, right? You guys, your colleagues might not care as much. But media, this is what they're going to look for. Investors, in our experience, when we work with a lot of early stage companies and they're looking at investors in the biotech space, they'll dig through your website. They'll look for news on the web about what you guys have put out there and what you've said. And that's kind of how they do some initial due diligence. So it's very important, again, they're analysts. As you guys get into bigger spheres of influence, analysts are a big deal with press releases. Any potential partnerships. We worked with a company recently that had they got their partnership with Diatherix, which is in Huntsville. You guys might be familiar, because they announced some funding, so they looked like a bigger deal. And then, of course, customers. That's usually the least important for something like this, though, when you guys are in a B2B space, and I imagine most of you are in B2B. That's kind of like the lowest level of influence for a press release, but it's still very important because people might search for you and look for some credibility. All right, so we talked about the why. I think everyone gets it, right? But the other thing is, okay, so what do you do with when you have it, or what do you do when you know you're going to write a release? And it's usually, people pay PR firms a lot of money to do this, and they don't need to in most cases. The big deal is that a lot of times non-PR people don't know how to communicate with lay people. And that's really the biggest lesson that you guys are probably going to take away from this. Is how do you communicate your big science awesome stuff to people like me, or the media, who might be someone who has 2 years of experience out of college with an undergrad in journalism, who doesn't know your space. How do you communicate to them and make sure that your message stays consistent and is translated well? We work with a lot of companies that have a lot of trouble with this, because in some cases we're working with the founders who just feel so much in love with their science, and it's great and it's awesome, and they should be, but they have a lot of trouble. The most common piece of feedback we get is, you're dumbing it down. You're not making it. I'm smarter than that. And what we have to say is, and sometimes it takes a lot of revisions and a lot of iterations, and what it comes down to is, well, you're not speaking to your peers. Your peers, maybe they will think you're stupid because you didn't say all the big words and the acronyms, but the media doesn't know all those big words. So you're going to need to talk in their language, and that's the hardest part. And I'd say once we get past that, and once people realize more words and bigger words doesn't mean better, your release is going to have more impact, and it's going to mean something to a reporter who you may be reaching out on your own. It might be your CEO founder reaching out to a reporter at GenomeWeb, and just making sure that your language is simple, you sound like a real human, is going to make all the difference, and you likely will get coverage if you follow that simple rule. Determining your overarching goal, that's pretty easy, and this is just going back to making sure that you guys do have news, so don't release nothing. Make sure it is something with substantial influence, and make sure that you've looked at your target publications where you want to be and see if they've covered similar news. Knowing your audience, super big deal. Again, back to the simple language. If you're targeting investors, you may write your release a little bit differently, but in most cases it's going to be simple and to the point, and you'll probably have to do a lot of red lines. And then this last piece, this could be a whole nother presentation. You may have already had one in the past, but make sure that your company has some messaging, and by that I mean, who are you? Can you say who you are in one line? And just making sure that's simple and clear too. Making sure you have, I'll show you an example, but boilerplate, so a longer description of your company. And that's important, and you don't want to change it too much, because once you're putting a press release out into the world, it lives on the internet forever. I'm actually going to pull up an older one that's still living on the internet. And it's going to be hard for you to go back and change that messaging if you've already put it out there into the world. So just spend some time with it. Don't do this overnight. Make sure that you've talked to whoever, if you have co-founders, other important people that you work with at your companies. Make sure that you've all decided and you agree on it. And that can be a bloody process too, so take your time.
Yeah, Kat, just to interject, the second point of determining your overarching goal, a lot of times Kat's in a position of being kind of that honest friend to our customers. It's like when my wife asked me, how do I look in this dress? Everybody knows the right answer to that. She needs a friend to tell her, yeah, it's probably not the right color on you, not me. and so Kat's kind of that person with clients that really says, hey, your goal to, be on the cover of the New York Times by next week, probably a little audacious, right? And so like we had an example with a prospect we were working with who had developed this next grade, over-the-counter thing. And so I won't get too specific. And he's a great guy. I mean, we called him the Sham Wow guy because he should have been on an infomercial. I mean, he could get shot in the leg and find something positive about it. And his goal was to kick off this program in November, and by March to be interviewed on Good Morning America. And I mean, he had no money. He had lost his home. I mean, he had sunk everything.
He conned Ted into buying him 2 lunches somehow.
Yeah, somehow. I mean, this guy was dynamic, and I love him. I really do. And I really think he's going to be successful. I do. And he was going to secure funding and offer us a lot of money to help him with his PR. We decided to part ways with him because we just said, we can't do it. We're not going to get you on Good Morning America in under 6 months, let alone 18 months. We just don't think it's newsworthy. Now, do you have something that's newsworthy for maybe something regional or something smaller? Absolutely. And sometimes we have to have those tough conversations. But that's one of the other recommendations is make sure you have some outside eyes looking at what you're doing. Again, we call that a good friend, right? So that's something, again, having the right goal is very, very important. So.
And having realistic expectations. That's something we'll talk about later too. It's just knowing that, maybe if you're a brand new company and you just got 1.5 million in seed funding, or maybe just, from a local investor, like a local family investor, you're probably not going to be in Fast Company. You might be in GenomeWeb, and that's cool, and that's great, and that's fantastic for you. And I think just knowing that it's going to be a phased approach, unless you overnight cure all diseases with one simple something or other, one simple blood draw, it's not going to happen. So just making sure that everyone's on the same page too internally when you do this on what the expectations are and what you think you're going to get is important too. And then what you need to start, I know I talked about messaging. So you need news. Don't just put a press release out there for no reason, and make sure it's something sort of newsworthy. Don't launch multiple times. We see that too. We see a company that says they launched every year. You just look back and from 2010 on, we've launched. Whoa. So that's a problem. And then that one-liner that I talked about, so this could be as simple as saying, and I'll pull up an example here on the next slide here, but these are two. I have a bigger version, I promise. But right here, this company is Acuity Labs, a company specializing in leading-edge diagnostics. That's it. That's all you need. You don't need a lot of fancy stuff. You don't need a lot of acronyms. The media understands, okay, we're going to put them in this bucket, and that's what you want to get. We are talking about a life sciences company that does diagnostics. And so that's pretty much it, and that's hard for people. I know it sounds simple, but it's difficult. The other thing is a quote. So a lot of people don't like to do this, especially in a startup mode, because it means you're usually deciding between one founder or one or more founders, or you're picking your favorite customer. You do need to decide, and the reason you do that is because, again, the media will copy and paste this and act like they've interviewed you. So you're canning a quote for them. And you might not believe me, but it happens every time we do this. They sometimes will call you and have a real interview too, and that's great, but a lot of times it doesn't happen. So you want to make sure you've canned yourself a really nice quote that doesn't have a lot of words in it. That's crazy. Make sure it's distinct, and then make sure you pick the right person. Who's going to be your spokesperson long term? Don't put in your chief scientist, even though he's a terrible spokesperson and he's just kind of a miserable human. Pick the guy who's going to want to do this long term, and who they'll see consistently in the media too, because you'll build a rapport. So you want to be able to do that too. And then this boilerplate, I'll show you an example of this. This is another check in the box type thing that you do need to think about. Just what's that longer description of your company, and have you all signed off on it? So I probably shouldn't have put these all up here together because you can't read them. So I'm going to pull up a real release that was distributed in the fourth quarter. Oop. How do I make this go up here, Stefan? I'm sorry. Oh, it's double? It's showing on your screen. I don't know how to make it go up there. Yeah, I thought I just had it up too. I'm sorry. Oh, it's okay. That's fine. We can go back to this then. Maybe. Maybe not, right?
The thing is lost for good.
Uh-oh.
Broke it.
I did break it. Oh my God. Can you just... Sorry, I'm on video too.
We'll edit that up.
Oh, you fixed it. And then the Firefox, yeah.
I'm not guaranteeing that I fixed that.
All right, great. Thank you. All right. So this is a real live press release that we distributed. It's on BusinessWire. I'll talk about this later. You probably don't need to do this in a lot of cases. But this is a company out of Nashville, startup. They kind of got born out of the Vanderbilt science community. And they sell a blood diagnostic to diagnose autoimmune disease. With a blood draw and algorithms and all that stuff, right? But we cleaned all that out of here, as you may see. So what I mentioned earlier about the boilerplate, that's this thing at the very end here. This about Acuity Labs. And it's really short and simple and to the point. There's not a lot of acronyms in here. There's not a lot of PCR, NGS, RNA, DNA, blah, blah, blah. It's just very simple about what they do. In some cases, especially for startups, you'll put something in there about, hey, we were a big part of the UGA innovation community, or whatever you guys usually say. And that gives you a little bit of street cred too. But that's what I mean there. It doesn't need to be long, but a lot of thought needs to go into it just because it is living forever.
So, with many of these, as you suggested, you make one announcement and it gets picked up by other sources. Are there certain keywords that you should use or stay away from that would help that strategy and drive that?
So, a lot of it is headlines like this with money are typically going to get picked up. In terms of keywords, it's more about, in my experience, if you reach out specifically to a reporter and you I'll show you an example of a pitch too, where you just copy your press release into your email and you say, hey, GenomeWeb person, you probably know a lot of these people, Turner Ray at GenomeWeb, say, hey, I have this great announcement. We launched a new product. It's available to this type of community. I'd love it if you could write about it. We're going to release it in 2 days. Like, call me. That to me works better than any sort of keywording. And Google, it used to be a lot easier to do a lot of keywords and get more pickup in general on the interwebs. And then Google changed their algorithm. I think it was 4 or 5 years ago. And kind of like everyone freaked out and everyone had to write real words again instead of just a bunch of keywords. So that's not as important anymore. It's still important for your website. If you're you need to have good organic keywords for SEO. But in terms of press releases, you need to just have good writing, good language, and good news. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time just on the structure of a release. And once it's a lot of words, so I apologize. But the headline needs to be super simple. I know you're hearing me say super simple a lot, but if you guys remember one thing, that's what you should remember, that it needs to be just really, really easy for people to understand. And that you won't lose your news that way. So this did get a ton of pickup because, again, you have obviously a company that's in the lab space of some sort, securing a bunch of money, and then you talk about the round. And if it's a grant, you kind of say the same thing. Secured $2 million NIH grant or whatever it is. Make it super simple. And then a lot of times you have this subhead here. And this is the more fun part for a lot of people because you're saying what it actually is, right? And that, again, gets picked up a lot. Sometimes you'll see this as the lead into a lot of articles that come off of this kind of thing. And then the other most important thing, So 3 things, super important, pretty important, important. This is the section that will get copied and pasted most often, this first paragraph. So that's written usually in a pretty standard format where you have that one-liner, who you guys are, what you do, what the news is, you announced you got $2 million, and then what you're gonna do with it. So why does it matter? The why. So if you include all that in your first paragraph, you'll get a lot of pickup and you'll get your message preserved throughout. The rest of this is not fluff, but it could be considered fluff. This is where you have that quote that you're gonna have get copy and pasted, where you pick your guy or your girl who's gonna be the ongoing spokesperson, and then you kind of run down in order of, as less important as the announcement gets, it kind of goes down. And reporters very often are only gonna get to here. And that's just unfortunately the way it's been for a very long time. If you have a relationship, you can often pitch it on the phone and say that kind of thing, but in a lot of cases, you're sending them a short snippet about why they should publish it, and that's it. And this again is on Business Wire or Wire Service. Do you guys know about Wire Services? Yeah, the Wire. This is just a really fast way to get your news out, but it costs a lot of money. So we'll talk about that real quick. Maybe not a lot of money. It all depends on your perspective.
I've got a question. I noticed in that release, the title, the subtitle talks about autoimmune disease. It's not the third paragraph. You actually say you're launching something specific disease.
Right.
Is that meant to position the company as, hey, we're not a one-product company, but we're...
Yeah, awesome. Absolutely. Yeah, so that actually was the strategy with them, is they were only able to launch one company or one disease-specific product in 2016, but they had a big plan for others that were in development, but they wanted to get all their research published first. You guys know clear rules, right? So you really don't have to have a lot of that stuff, unfortunately, but they wanted to play it safe. This happened right around Theranos getting exposed, which you probably all know about pretty well. So they wanted to be incredibly conservative. So yes, so the big news was the 2 million. Then what do they do, and then what specifically are they launching? And they did want it to get buried down a little bit because they had several others in the works. Absolutely. Which could be a strategy depending on how you look at it. Awesome. All right, so what do you do with it when you write it? Like I said, the intent here is not to tell you you're gonna have to spend a lot of money on this, but I do want to talk about the Wire Service just so you guys are aware. There are a lot of them. There are 2 that are awesome, and that's PR Newswire and Business Wire. PR Newswire has more of a consumer feel. Business Wire, am I messing up?
Just move it to the...
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, so PR Newswire again is more consumery, so if you have a product that's going direct-ish to consumer, or eventually will look that way, they're a little bit better. Business Wire is great if you guys are going B2B, and most of you probably are. Even if you go on the cheap for a Wire Service, one release is going to cost you around $1,500, and that can be too much for a lot of people. But if you do have the funds and you have something big like a seed round or a grant that you want to get out to the scientific community, it's a great way to do it. All the big news services like ABC News, NPR, they will all put it on their websites. They won't necessarily put it anywhere where anyone can find it, but you have a greater likelihood of people seeing and knowing your news and then hopefully doing a bigger write-up on it. So it can be really good for several things, but we've even as an agency done without it quite a bit depending on how our clients' budgets are. So definitely not a have-to-have, but something nice if you're doing something incredible. And again, yeah, you don't need one. But there are other services too. I don't recommend using them. A lot of them are kind of like fly-by-night. You won't get a lot of results. So second, you've decided you're not going to do a wire release. So instead, you're going to need to find a bunch of reporters at publications you love, and you're going to have to find the right person, and you're going to email them. So this is a great job for any interns that you guys have. If you want to do it yourself, it's fun too, because in a lot of cases you're going to have great relationships with these reporters. And you're not going to have a gigantic spreadsheet, right? You're going to have maybe no more than 10 that you're going to send this out to, especially if it is something like we're talking about, seed, launch, grant. And make sure you've looked at what they're writing. Don't pull off the publisher and editor-in-chief and email them and assume that they're going to write about it. They usually don't write about stuff. Find the person who's writing about stories that you read and that you like and that you would like to write about you. So that's in some cases, it's just a reporter. They don't have a fancy title, but they're going to be great for you guys. Be a person. Don't be a scientist in your email. Be a person. Just write a really nice, clear email about like, I would like you to do this for me. I have an awesome piece of news, and it's going to be awesome for both of us. Maybe you don't say all the awesomes, but you get the point. And then phone calls. Super controversial these days at PR agencies. Most reporters do not want to be called anymore. So email them. If you have something absolutely phenomenal going on, like you just hired Ted as your chief sales officer, right? Maybe you could call him then, but probably not. Most of them will actually tell you, if you looked at their LinkedIn profiles or something like that, they'll say, don't call me. Okay, just email me. If your news is amazing, I will see it. So just kind of research these people a little bit. And again, your list isn't going to be that long, so make the time for it, especially if you're doing it on your own. It'll pay off. And then I put together this list because I'm assuming y'all are in this kind of space. Am I correct? GenomeWeb, Fierce Biotech, that kind of thing. These are the common trades that you guys will get a lot of luck with a good announcement. And they're very nice and they're very receptive and they love startups. We've had the best luck with these people. They're nice, they'll give you the time of day. A lot of times they'll interview you just to hear what's going on, even if they kind of know it's not what they can publish. They'll just want to hear what you're doing and what your company's all about. Because for them, the more news they have, the better they are. And a lot of them are actually given raises and promotions based on the news that they break, the new news that they have that their competitors don't have. So they're usually willing to talk to you guys. Did you have a hand? Or is that just a, okay. Awesome. Yeah, and then of course there's the big ones too. If you guys are announcing funding of a significant value in excess of $1 million, you can get the Wall Street Journal to talk to you too. We're not gonna talk about that because it's scary. But for this IQity thing, they actually did end up in the Wall Street Journal. And I showed you another one over here that was Kylos that I didn't go into. They were in TechCrunch, off of a pretty bootstrap release. But a lot of it is that they already had a history, they had money behind it, they had 10 million in funding in addition. So money usually gets you where you want to go in terms of the big publications. If you're just launching something without a lot of money, stick with your friends here. Eventually the Wall Street Journal will want to talk to you. Any questions about these guys? Or do you guys have any specific publications that you want to talk to that you've had trouble with? Nope, all right. Awesome. So I'm going to show you what an email pitch looks like. If you're doing this on your own, you're just going to email a reporter what it looks like.
Excuse me, Ken, I do have a question about that. I mean, so it's quite the list there. And now each one of those is hitting a slightly different niche.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to target which one specifically or prioritize? Is there
So you want to give me an example piece of news?
a piece of news? Well, the one we had this morning, we talked about this morning, where there was a federal grant over $1 million. The field was either human health and was, without getting too much into details,
Yeah.
Antibodies and
Okay.
research tools.
Okay. So if you're in life sciences, most likely, and again, I don't know all the backgrounds of everyone in here, but GenomeWeb is the top tier trade in your space, most likely. Very reputable. They would take something like that. So a lot of it is just in terms of narrowing down the list, just seeing what else they're writing about. Some of these are kind of the hot sheets of the industry, right? It's like not really news sometimes, or they have like a lot of sponsored content that's pay for play. So you get kind of down there here. But GenomeWeb is always very credible, and they do publish a lot of that stuff. The other ones here will. These guys have been trying to up their game. But yeah, if you need to narrow it down, like if you only have time to really work on 3, that would be maybe move this here and then this here. So GenomeWeb, the Timmerman Report, and Xconomy, they'll do nice stuff for you guys. Absolutely. Any other questions on publications? Okay, cool. All right, and in terms of what an email pitch looks like, so it's definitely not scary. I know this is hard to read, and I think they'll be able to have our deck too, if you want to see. So this is a real email pitch. This was to Dow Jones, which is the Wall Street Journal. This was on the 2 million seed round. And really the only place where I say anything is right here. And it's just very simple, like, are you interested in an exclusive on a $2 million seed round? And then this is basically the first paragraph of my press release. The company's gonna be doing this, and something about Vanderbilt so that she knows I'm not a fly-by-night company. And then this is all logistics. This is, I want to distribute this by 8:30 a.m. this Thursday on the 7th. I can send you the draft release, blah, blah, blah. So that's just logistics. So it's very easy, very simple. If you send them an email this long, you might scare them away. They might not read it. I know that sounds sad that people aren't reading things and that we have to treat them like 12-year-olds, but that's how it is. I mean, they get a lot of emails. We'll get complaints from especially the Wall Street Journal saying they get 300 emails a day. Like, sorry, you know. But in a lot of cases, they're just skimming your subject lines. And that's important too, making sure you're saying exactly what's going on. Always put the money in the subject line too. They all love that. So it's pretty easy. I know I'm standing up here and I'm saying easy and simple a lot, but it's truly getting your head around, boiling it down. You're shaking your head.
It's not easy.
Well, yeah, and you know, I'm biased too just because I do it all the time, so I'm probably like, whatever. But it really is just getting your head around how can I be simple about this? And we know it's not easy because people pay us a lot of money to make it easy, so I totally get it. But you can do it on your own. And just make sure you're accessible too. If you're emailing someone from a Gmail account and you don't have how they can get a hold of you, remember to throw it in there. Phone numbers, alternate email addresses, cell phones. And I also would recommend if you are making interns do your list, don't have your interns email the reporters. Do that yourself. If you're going to bootstrap this and you have a company of 5 people and you got $1 million, send it from the person who is going to be speaking to the reporter, and or at least someone who can get that person very easily. Also make sure the person who can speak to the reporter is around. You'd be surprised how often that does not happen.
Hey, Kat, can you expand on that? What's your perception of why that's not easy?
Well, again, I think having the scientists and their writing style and what they've been trying to do is trying to get the high level, not a detailed level, but a high level message across. That's the hard part, is distilling down years and years of knowledge into a simple one-liner. That's the difficult part.
Yeah, it's painful.
Yeah, and it does. In my experience working at McKesson, we had some brilliant, engineers developing great software and all that stuff. But man, could they not describe it? Because everything was important. Everything. I mean, everything. And so.
And the passive voice is super important too.
Yeah.
That passive, lots of words voice.
Exactly, and I think that's where you're going. When you say simple, maybe it's not so easy to summarize it, but having a simple message is so important. And,
Yeah.
You gotta kind of write on a 4th grade level, really, because again,
We'll let you go up to 10. If you're writing B2B life sciences, do you guys know how to check reading level in Word? We'll send you some instructions after that. We'll send it to Stefan. It's a real easy feature. You just go in and you'll probably cringe when you see how intelligent you are and you're at grade level 27 or something like that. And it's really hard to get it to 10. For you guys in your community, 10 is okay, 10th grade. And you're still gonna feel like someone's shooting you in the heart and it's terrible and whatever. But for clients that are doing consumer stuff, they're writing on a 4th to 6th grade level. So you guys have it good. Yeah.
gosh, we call that the TED level. There's 10 and then there's TED. If you can get it,
You should see my emails to Ted.
yeah.
Ted,
Can TED
where
do
are
this?
you?
Okay, good.
Yeah, you can send it to Ted. He'll let you know what grade level.
Yeah, if I didn't understand it, you're good.
Yeah, so we'll send you how to do that. It's pretty easy and it's really enlightening. But quick story, the IQD guys, do you guys know that company? I don't know how close startup communities are. But their CEO, PhD guy, super smart, he tried to fire me on the spot in person because he thought that I was dumbing his stuff down. So, I mean, there was like blood on the walls and, ridiculous stuff. Luckily, he had a team that knew that couldn't happen. But yeah, it was really painful. And getting that release to where it needed to be was also painful. But it also proves my point once he started talking to reporters, which was, great that happened too, where they told him the same feedback. And when really important people at important publications tell you the same thing your PR girl is telling you, usually it validates a little bit. So, but it can be hard. So we should have definitely paid more attention to that point when you're nodding your head. Any questions about email pitching? And you can do it from a Gmail account too. You don't need a PR agency. In fact, some publications like a TechCrunch will like it more if you have a little Gmail account or if it's just your company name that they know you're a real person. Sometimes that actually works better.
When you send the email, there is a contact, then you just send you someone, or there is a, how do you know?
How do you know who? So in most cases, you are going to go on the website, GenomeWeb. You're going to look at who's writing about your space. and that person's name is going to be listed, and there's usually a hyperlink, and it's going to lead to their email. Sometimes their Twitter. Sometimes they want you to tweet them, and then you just email that person. It's usually pretty straightforward. It just takes a couple clicks usually on the website. A lot of PR agencies have these big databases that cost millions of dollars. I don't actually know how much ours costs, and it has all their information. You get the same stuff if you just take your time. If you take 10 minutes on a website and look for it. Yeah, so, and usually if you email the reporter instead of the info at or whatever, that's better. Yeah, in some cases you'll get a response from an info at or contact us at, but in most cases not. Yeah. And sometimes if you get the wrong person too, if you email the wrong reporter, they'll pass it on to their colleagues. So as long as you're a real human and you are someone that probably isn't getting paid a lot of money to do this, people are nice to you. You guys are in a better position than a lot of agencies. This is just another example. This was the launch for Kylos, which is out in Huntsville in their incubator. This one wasn't too much money, but this is a TechCrunch release, same thing. Hey, I know you talk about genetic testing companies. Thought you want to know about this. They're launching and that was big news too, because that was the 23andMe trend, right? The direct-to-consumer genetic testing for $300. And then I just pasted this in there. So she might only get to this. And then she emailed me and said, I'll do it if you give me a free test. Great. Works for me. So sometimes you get that kind of response. But anyway, yeah, it's very simple. And then you'll do this if it's something that's not, well, I won't get into exclusives, but you can always paste in your release no matter what. But I would recommend not attaching it as a Word document, because sometimes reporters have issues with that of some sort. So any more questions on, I know I'm like skimming through some high-level examples here, but any questions on these guys? No? And again, that was TechCrunch, so you can do it too. You can be in awesome publications because you guys are doing amazing things. And then what else? So say you were really successful, you got the right reporter, you got an interview, you got picked up on GenomeWeb or whatever you wanted to do, then don't forget about your release. Know that you can. It will live beyond that initial launch. So put it on your website. Again, this is great for investors. We get a lot of, we work with a lot of these early stage investors, and they say that. They're like, well, they need to have some sort of presence, or we need to know someone, because they will look at you. So make sure that your news is up there and that it's presented well. And then if you get pickup, if you are in GenomeWeb or you're in the Wall Street Journal, make sure that's on your website too. And then social. That's a whole other conversation too, but hopefully you guys have some sort of social presence, whether that's your own Twitter account, your own LinkedIn. You might not have a company Twitter, but make sure that through your own accounts, even if it is just LinkedIn, you're posting that news so everyone knows that you're amazing and you did something great. And you'll get a lot of share that way too. You might not be on GenomeWeb or you might not be wherever, but people will notice and it'll get shared beyond that initial sphere that you sent it out to. And then also important, if you guys have any influencers that you need to send it to, don't forget to send it to them as well. Don't assume that they're going to see it on the internet, on Google, or on whatever. In a lot of cases, people just don't. There's a lot of news out there, so you want to make sure you cut through the clutter. Any questions on social?
I know in this area there are folks that write blogs on specific areas. What about maybe focusing or getting your release out to those types of individuals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially I'm thinking like Timmerman Report, but that's pretty corporate. If there's one, if you have a blogger, we do a lot with advocacy type patient bloggers in this space, especially with this with the genetic testing client where it's a breast cancer community or something like that. They are usually extremely receptive. So, and again, it depends on what your product is and what your news is, but if it is something where that more grassrootsy advocacy type approach is going to play well, typically bloggers answer their email, they're easy to get a hold of, and they'll do what you want because they think it's exciting too. And they don't get a lot of traffic from people sending them news, so in some cases they're more receptive. Absolutely. Again, it all depends. I mean, in some cases you might get a few bloggers to write about it and it passes up. But more often you get a really big publication to write about you and then the other ones write about it after that. But it can work both ways for sure. And then I'm almost at the end here, but what can you expect? And I think I've talked about this throughout. This is my beautiful logo slide to entice you to write press releases. But this all actually happened from the, this was the Kylos release when they released a funding announcement. So they're not very big. They have 10 million in outside funding, but it was all through family funds, right? So after they launched, they announced this, and they did put it on the wire, but a lot of this was us pitching directly to these publications and saying, hey, what about this? Do you remember them from when we launched in November? They've done this now. So awesome coverage, and really accelerated their business. One piece of really great coverage from a press release can really, in a lot of cases, make your business. For these guys, they're kind of Wild West. I think a lot of you probably are a little Wild West, knowing that you're in the startup game, but they weren't sure if their business model was going to work. They weren't sure if it was validated. They weren't sure if they wasted a bunch of people's money. So they got this placement with Business Insider that did a review of it after their funding. They did a review of the test, and they had gone from 0 orders in 2 months to 1,000 in 1 day. So that doesn't happen to everyone, and for them too, they're business to consumer, so it's very different than getting a big contract with a reference lab. But definitely, totally validated their business model, and everyone was happy, and everyone's great. So that doesn't always happen, but it can happen. So it's important to pay attention to this kind of stuff. And that is it. So hopefully I didn't speed talk y'all's ears off. I probably did, because I can watch it later, right? But yeah, do you guys have any questions? I know we tried to make it quick so that we could have some time.
Yeah, thank you. This was very useful, very practical. And
Thank you, even if that's not true.
it's interesting that one of the things that you've primarily focused on was press releases. At the very beginning, you talked about the messaging, branding, and identity, and those things. A lot of those things kind of have to be in place first to be able to do this very effectively. And so what I'm wondering is, does your organization provide services that focus on the broader aspects of brand identity development?
Yeah.
Those things, so that when you're doing a press release, you kind of have that critical piece already figured out.
Yeah, let me, so 2 things. One is, you can pay us to do anything, right? I don't want to make this a big sales pitch. But in a lot of cases, we do come in at the start. So here's the deal. If you get a big grant and you have a company name, maybe you have a Shelva website, don't not launch. Don't not spread that news just because you don't have some ridiculous brand with colors and attributes and whatever. This is Kylos. This is the scrappy people out in Huntsville we talked about. We did all their branding. We did a big messaging exercise for them. So we spent close to $100,000 sitting around in a room fighting with each other. You do not need to do that to get yourself out there. They were a little bit more mature. They were B2B before this, so this was a pivot for them, not necessarily a restart. But yeah, it always helps, especially if you're trying to make a big launch, to have somewhere really beautiful for a reporter to go back and say, okay, they are legit, but you don't have to. So as long as you have something that you feel good about and you don't think you're going to change too much, because that's the big risk, is if you put something out there in the media and you change significantly, you lose a lot of trust and you lose a lot of equity just in who the brand might be. So, but yeah, if you want to pay us to do your branding, absolutely, call Ted. His business cards are right here. Anyone else have questions?
My company had a press release associated with the University of Georgia that learned about a cancer compound that we had preclinical testing. And then one of the things that was difficult to deal with was all the contacts coming into me in person because I'm a one-person company.
Right.
Is your drug ready? Can my grandmother get this, that? How do you deal with that? Because it was actually pretty overwhelming for a while.
Yeah. Not media there's just general public coming in.
Contacting.
So,
I feel compelled to answer these people saying,
right.
We're 18 months away, sorry.
Right.
How do you deal with that?
So,
Getting distracted from your mission.
Right. So if you are truly one-man show and you don't have any help doing that, so this happened one other time where we advised a group to do this. It was one person, same kind of thing, and we had helped him draft a basically copy and paste response. Just hey, thank you so much for your email, blah. And we set it up so that it was auto ping. Like we may get back to you if this is relevant to blah blah blah. But if you're a patient inquiring or if you're a blah blah blah, read this. And that stopped a lot. It didn't feel that good for that person because it's your business. You feel good about it. You feel good that people care. But again, it was just overload for him. He couldn't handle it and didn't know how to respond, and he didn't want to say the wrong thing. So yeah, it's difficult. That's awesome though. It's obviously well received, right?
Yeah. A lot of phone calls. Sometimes people got my phone number. It's just amazing how people
So,
How did you get my number?
yeah,
I figure out where is my number out there.
yeah,
The grid, huh?
yeah. And
It's everywhere.
did you release that on the wire service, or do you remember?
That was from UGA, so, or maybe the Mayo Clinic in UGA did it.
You know, people are tenacious. If they see your name in there, like you were the quote,
Yeah.
they'll just find you. It's unfortunate. I got calls from like billing services at physicians because I was on a hospital's press release. I mean,
Right.
yeah, not the same problem, but
Okay.
yeah, we've done
You
that.
have to be ready.
Yeah, and that's why.
Careful when you do a press release.
Yeah, and that goes back to making sure you pick the right person. I mean, that's great. Sometimes you get no response. That's fantastic. Sometimes no one cares, right? But that's going back to picking the right person to be in the release and to be that contact person. In some cases, that might be you, and in some cases, maybe it doesn't need to be you.
Unfortunately, the billionaires call and say, hey, I have $700.
Yeah, bummer. You might have missed them though. You were so overloaded. You could have looked one over.
What? I said, well, how much money do you have?
Yeah. That's what you should do. Next time.
What's your network?
Next time. Yeah, that's awesome. Great report.
Maybe that could be your auto response. Please reply with your network.
Yeah.
Yes, I just wanted to ask, kind of bouncing off of what you asked earlier, what would be like the minimum in terms of like brand establishment that you would need before you initially wanted to start a press release?
Probably a web presence. Well, not probably, a web presence. Yeah, I mean, it's almost required because people are going to look you up and they're not going to write about you if you're not really there. And there have been a lot of cases too of just fraud, companies putting out fake releases, which it's, in a lot of cases it's a shell game. It's really, we probably shouldn't even talk about it, but that happens a lot, and they will check to make sure you have some sort of web presence. If you're good with the internets, you could do that yourself. You could establish it yourself. You could get a friend or whatever just to put together some shell components for you. So your logo, your company name for sure, and then it might just be a one-pager that scrolls the website and just making sure there's some just initial information about the founders and the company's mission and what you do. So, yeah. I mean, hopefully it's a little bit more than that, but we've seen that is probably the minimum that gets results for sure. Yeah.
And I'll just say the other thing I'll add is it really is a good investment of time to think about who you are. You know, and I mean, we were having a conversation on the way here of just, you know, who Dodge is. And, you know, because that's a question we wrestle with, you know, over time, because that changes, you know, what your focus is. And with the space you all are in, you know, you're having new breakthroughs, you're learning new things, and it may pivot your focus. So it's a great exercise to go through to talk about